The woman in the water. The first time I saw her, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was one of those quiet Friday nights when the world felt asleep. My brother and I were out by the old forest lake again, the kind of place that didn't show up on maps and didn't want to be found. That was our spot. We'd hike nearly an hour through tangled brush and damp trails just to reach it. The air always smelled of pine and silt, and the only sounds were crickets and the low hum of frogs echoing across the water. We loved it that way. The seclusion made it feel like the lake belonged to us. We'd been fishing here since we were kids, two brothers and a bucket of worms, chasing bluegill under the fading sunset. But that night, the lake didn't feel like ours anymore. The sun was sinking low, bleeding orange into the dark water. JJ sat beside me on a cluster of flat rocks, half laughing as he tried to thread a cricket onto his hook. I remember teasing him about how clumsy he was when I noticed it, a ripple. Far across the lake, something was moving, slow, deliberate. "Hey," I nudged him, "you see that?" We both stared at the water. At first, it just looked like a big fish disturbing the surface. Maybe a catfish. But the ripples grew wider, heavier, as though something much larger was pushing up from below. Then it rose. A dark figure, upright. My first thought was no way, someone was out there, waist deep in the middle of that freezing lake. I remember JJ whispering, "That's a person." I felt my pulse quicken. It didn't make sense. Nobody came here. Nobody even knew this lake existed unless they'd been shown the way. The figure didn't move at first, just stood there. Still. Silent. The reflection of the moon shimmered off the surface like a blade. "She's not swimming," JJ muttered. "What's she doing?" "She?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's hair." And he was right. A cascade of dark strands clung to the figure's shoulders, glinting as she swayed gently in the water, almost rhythmically, like the lake itself was breathing with her. We just watched. Neither of us spoke. It was hypnotic, terrifying, but impossible to look away. Minutes passed. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't splash. Just moved side to side, slow and measured, like she belonged there. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she sank. No sound. No ripples. Just gone. JJ blinked, muttered, "Did you see that?" I nodded, already feeling that crawling unease in my chest. I wanted to leave. My instincts screamed that something wasn't right. But JJ insisted we stay. "Probably just some weird night swimmer," he said, chuckling nervously. "Let's just fish." So we tried. But the night was wrong now. The stillness carried weight, that invisible tension that makes every noise behind you sound like footsteps. After a while, JJ whispered, "She's back." And there she was again. Only this time, closer. She rose from the water like a ghost. The moonlight hit her face, pale, calm, beautiful in a way that didn't feel real. She smiled. "Hi," she said softly. My stomach dropped. Her voice was too casual, too warm for what we were seeing. Like she'd been expecting us. JJ managed to stammer out, "Hey, are you okay?" She tilted her head, hair dripping across her face, and replied, "I'm fine. Just swimming." "In that?" I said. "It's freezing." She laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It sounded hollow, distant, like it echoed through the water before reaching us. "You'll get used to it," she said, brushing her hair aside. "You should come in." Her eyes gleamed, reflecting the moonlight like glass. For a moment, I thought she was joking. But then she drifted closer, not walking, not swimming, just gliding forward, chest barely breaking the surface. JJ froze beside me. I could feel his hand trembling against his fishing pole. I whispered, "Let's go." But before we could move, she spoke again. This time, louder. "Don't go." The softness was gone. Her tone was sharp, almost pleading, almost commanding. Then she screamed. A piercing, animalistic sound that tore through the trees and echoed across the lake. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. JJ dropped everything, rods, bait, our cooler, and sprinted beside me through the brush. We didn't stop until we saw the glow of our car headlights through the trees. Even then, her scream still echoed in my head, like it had followed us. That night, we called the police from the car, but by the time anyone came, she was gone. No trace. But even now, years later, every time I close my eyes, I see that smile again, floating above the dark water. The lake hasn't been the same since. The second visit. It had been weeks since that night, the night the woman screamed our names across the water. JJ and I tried pretending it didn't happen. We stopped mentioning it, stopped going near that lake. But silence doesn't erase memory. It only lets it rot and fester. By the third week, the nightmares started. I'd dream of the lake glowing under moonlight, still and silver, until her head would rise slowly out of the water, her mouth stretching into that same smile. Always smiling. Always calling me closer. JJ confessed he'd been dreaming the same thing. He laughed when he said it, but his eyes didn't match his tone. He hadn't been sleeping much. Neither of us had. One Saturday evening, Dad caught wind of it. He was never one to buy into ghost stories, but he noticed our gear collecting dust. He laughed and said, "My boys finally outgrew fishing." JJ and I looked at each other. Neither of us wanted to say the truth, that we were terrified. So JJ said, "We just needed a break." Dad smirked. "Then let's take one together. Sunrise tomorrow, I'll bring coffee. You two pick the spot." I wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed it. But JJ agreed before I could open my mouth. He said it would be fine, that maybe going back in daylight would clear the air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the faint sound of frogs outside, the same sound that used to remind me of the lake. Only now it felt like a warning. We left just after dawn. The forest was still wrapped in fog when we reached the trail. The path felt different, narrower, darker. Every step through the dewy grass carried that damp smell of decay and algae. When the lake finally came into view, I stopped walking. It looked so calm. So normal. The water shimmered gold beneath the rising sun, birds danced over the reeds, and if I hadn't known better, I would have sworn nothing strange had ever happened here. Dad laughed, stretching. "Beautiful morning, huh?" JJ forced a smile. "Yeah. Perfect." We set up near the same rocks as last time. Dad started unpacking bait, talking about how this place reminded him of when we were kids. But I couldn't focus. Every ripple in the water made my chest tighten. After a while, I noticed JJ staring at the far side of the lake again, the same spot where we'd seen her. His jaw was tight. "You okay?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He just pointed. The surface of the water was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. But the pattern, the rhythm, was familiar. Circular, deliberate. My throat went dry. "Probably a fish," Dad said, not looking up. But JJ and I knew. We'd seen that movement before. I could feel the air getting colder, even though the sun was already up. Then, faintly, I heard something, a splash. Dad stood now, squinting toward the far side. "Someone out there?" No one answered. The ripples grew larger, drifting toward the center of the lake. Then, out of nowhere, a shape broke the surface. It was smaller this time, just a head, half submerged, hair slicked back against pale skin. "Morning swim," Dad said, chuckling nervously. "Crazy folks." But Jay whispered, "It's her." I wanted to tell him to shut up, but my tongue wouldn't move. The figure didn't swim. It drifted. Then, it vanished again. Dad sighed. "Probably duck-dived. Nothing to worry about." He was trying to sound casual, but his voice cracked mid-sentence. We waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Then, something surfaced again. But this time closer. Much closer. Her face was visible now, clearer than I'd ever seen. It was the same girl, same soft features, same unsettling calmness. But her expression was different. Empty. Blank. She looked straight at us. Not around. Not past. At us. Then she smiled. The same faint, knowing smile from that night. Dad raised his hand like he was going to wave. "Morning," he called out. She didn't respond. The smile faded. And then, she sank again, soundlessly. Dad frowned. "All right, that's it. We're leaving." But before we could pack, the water erupted. Something massive moved just beneath the surface. Fast, powerful. The sound wasn't like a fish or a splash. It was deeper. Like something dragging. Jija yelled, "Dad, move!" A violent surge of water slammed against the rocks where we'd been sitting seconds ago. My fishing gear scattered into the air. Dad stumbled back, dripping, staring at the water in disbelief. What the hell was that? But I didn't answer. Because right where the wave had hit, a hand had broken the surface. A pale, human hand, fingers outstretched, trembling, before it vanished beneath the ripples. We froze. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. That was when Dad finally believed us. What the lake hides. We didn't speak a word on the drive home. The sound of water slapping against the sides of the boat ramp echoed in my head the whole way. Dad's hands were still shaking when he turned the ignition. His eyes stayed fixed on the rearview mirror, watching the dirt trail fade into the trees like he expected someone, or something, to follow us. That night, none of us could sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear JJ pacing his room. At one point, I got up for water and found Dad sitting in the kitchen, lights off, staring through the back window toward the woods. "She wasn't human," he said quietly, not even turning to look at me. I froze in the doorway. "What do you mean?" I asked. He rubbed his face, sighing like he didn't want to answer. I saw her eyes. Before she went under, they didn't look right. He didn't explain what that meant, but I could tell he'd been replaying it over and over in his head, just like me. A few days later, JJ came into my room holding his phone. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. He showed me a local news article, a short one, buried deep online. Body recovered in White Birch Lake. Unidentified female, estimated 19 to 22 years old. Authorities believe she drowned sometime in early spring. There was no photo, just a few sentences. The article said the lake had been drained slightly for maintenance, and that's when the divers found her, caught between branches beneath the surface. JJ scrolled further down. They said she'd been there for months. My stomach dropped. "That's impossible." He nodded slowly. "We saw her 2 weeks ago." Neither of us spoke after that. There was nothing to say. That night, I had another dream. I was back at the lake, standing on the rocks, the surface calm as glass. The air was silent. No insects, no wind, just a dull, humming noise that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Then bubbles broke the surface. A hand rose slowly out of the water. Then hair. Then a face, her face. She smiled again, lips blue, eyes milky white. "You came back," she whispered. I woke up gasping, heart racing, the sound of dripping water still echoing in my ears. When I told JJ about it the next morning, he didn't look surprised. "She's not gone," he said. "You feel it too, don't you?" I didn't answer. A week passed. Then two. Life tried to move on, but something in me couldn't let it. Curiosity has a way of becoming poison when fear mixes with it. One evening, against every bit of common sense, I drove back to the lake alone. The air was colder than it should have been. The trees seemed to lean inward, closing around the path like they didn't want me to leave. When I reached the shoreline, the sky was bruised purple, and mist clung to the water like smoke. I stood there, staring at the stillness. "Why us?" I whispered. Something rippled, small, deliberate, near the center of the lake. Then a voice. So familiar. "Because you watched me." I froze. The voice was close, too close. My eyes darted along the water's edge, but there was nothing. Just black reflection. Then I saw her, standing knee-deep this time, hair hanging over her shoulders, water dripping from her fingers. Her skin was pale as bone, but her eyes were hollow, glowing faintly from within like dying embers. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. I stumbled backward. "What do you want?" She tilted her head. "To stay." Before I could move, the water behind her began to churn, violently, like something was rising beneath. For a split second I saw shapes, faces, pale and motionless, hundreds of them swirling beneath the surface. I turned and ran. Branches tore at my clothes, roots clawed at my ankles, but I didn't stop. I didn't breathe until I saw the glow of my car headlights through the trees. When I finally looked back, the lake was still again. Quiet. Empty. JJ and I never went back after that. The police said the girl had no ID, no family, no one to claim her. They buried her in an unmarked grave just a few miles from the water. But sometimes, late at night, when I drive past those woods, I swear I can still see a shimmer between the trees, a reflection that doesn't belong there. And when the wind blows just right, I can almost hear it. *, you should have stayed.